Welcome to Bad Elizabeth. I'm your host, Gideon Evans.
And I'm your host, Kathy Egan-Taylor. The premise of this show is exactly what it sounds like. Each episode, we profile a different Elizabeth, or derivation of that name.
Like Bess.
Or Elsa.
Or Ellie.
Who deserves to be called bad.
Yes, and the word bad is also pretty malleable, and in many cases there are extenuating circumstances that cause these Elizabeths to go awry.
And they do go awry.
It's our producer and engineer, Will Becton of Jet Road Studios. Today's episode is Lizzie Borden.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Bad Elizabeth. I am Kathy Egan-Taylor, and I am speaking with my co-host,
Gideon Evans.
And then we also have Will Becton.
Hi.
Who will chime in.
And steer us on the right course. So today's episode, we're focusing on Lizzie Borden.
And she's one that a lot of people will know about.
Well, yes.
Somewhat, at least the idea of her.
There's a nursery rhyme that we're familiar with.
I love that.
That says, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
And that's spooky. Why are nursery rhymes spooky? That whole Nightmare on Elm Street, the soundtrack is children singing.
Well, like Ring Around the Rosie is about the Black Plague.
Well, it's funny because that's funny that you mention it because I actually looked into that because I was thinking of this one. Apparently that's an urban legend, but...
Let's just perpetuate it.
I know, let's do it because why not? It's been going on so long.
For centuries. If you think about fairy tales like Aesop's Fables and the Grimm brothers, they're all about, they're very dark and about controlling children and controlling them by fear. And it wasn't her mother she whacked, it was her stepmother.
Right. And before we get into the details of the case, I did want to mention that apparently they questioned her at some point and she said her birth name was Lizzie. That's okay, right? She still qualifies for Bad Elizabeth. We're allowing derivations.
Yes. She was born Lizzie Andrew Borden. And I also, at the top of the show, I want to say that I'm having lingering allergy problems. So I'll sound a little nasal throughout this. I might cough.
It's okay.
You'll throw off the AI. Be
That's right.
Copyable.
Exactly.
Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So this is the background. So Lizzie Borden was born Lizzie Andrew Borden in 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts. 1860 was kind of the industrial age coming in America, closing on the Gilded Age. 30 years later, we have coming up the World's Fair is coming to Chicago and all that stuff. So America's a poppin'. There were many Bordens, family members in the Fall River area, and some were rich, like her father and her uncle, but some were also considered what they call swamp Yankees, which I guess were low income and rural, like rednecks.
Like Ben Affleck?
Yeah, exactly. The Ben Afflecks.
Sorry, Ben.
No, you don't have to apologize to Ben. He's doing just fine.
Yeah.
So Lizzie's father was an undertaker. Actually, it was a big business back then because you could sell corpses to medical examiners.
Oh, interesting. And then he ended up being president of a bank.
So he did very well.
So he's wealthy.
He's wealthy.
But they lived in kind of a low rent house.
They lived it. So his wife died.
Sarah was his former wife.
Former wife. And he remarried. He has two daughters, Lizzie, and she has an older sister, Emma, who's 9 years older. And she was kind of considered the spinster.
Right.
Emma was so unremarkable and so nondescript that she once was described as having lived a long life without so much as occasioning an adjective.
Wow.
She's not nice, she's not clean, she's not polite.
You would not even know she's there. Maybe she was in the house and nobody knew she was there.
She was apparently away during this incident, but that could be true. She's so inconsequential, she could have been there. And apparently the only portrait of Emma, her sister, it's a drawing of her. Half of her face is obscured by her left hand.
Of course.
Which is kind of like when I take pictures, I usually put my middle finger in front of it.
Right.
Lizzie was described as tall, stocky, jolly, dressy, and unremarkable.
And demure, I've heard that word also.
Yeah.
They're a bit religious, maybe?
She worked at the local church. She was very active in that.
Lizzie, we're talking
Lizzie
about.
was. Emma kind of was like the spinster.
But what makes you a spinster? Wasn't Lizzie not married too?
Lizzie wasn't married, but she was perpetuating the idea that she was looking for a man.
I see.
Going to social functions.
What's that word that people did not having sex? A slang word for it. Incel.
Incel.
So Emma was kind of like an incel, but a girl.
So on August 4th, 1892, so Lizzie's 32 years old at the time, she bludgeoned her stepmother, Abby.
Wait a second. You're saying she bludgeoned her stepmother? I think we're kind of rushing to judgment.
I'm giving you the short.
I know.
And then we can unpack it.
Okay.
I'm just giving the
Let's
background.
just say there's some people on different sides of this issue. Here's how the legend goes.
The legend goes that she bludgeoned her stepmother, Abby, with 19 blows, and then also bludgeoned her father, Andrew, with 10 to 11 blows.
But the nursery rhyme said 40 whacks and 41. I
Well,
guess
they
they're
also said it was
poetic license.
exactly. You know how kids, they'll say anything.
That's true.
They're not fact checkers. So that's the story.
Right.
That's the legend. So let's look at Fall River, Massachusetts in the 1880s and being a female.
And we can also mention maybe that we've looked at some reliable sources in researching this, but we've also both watched this kind of like slightly goofy movie.
Yes.
Which you found, which is Elizabeth Montgomery.
Elizabeth Montgomery, who was known for Bewitched.
Right.
They did a TV movie in 1975 starring Elizabeth Montgomery as Lizzie Borden and pretty much painted her as a murderer.
We can have spoilers for a 1975 movie,
I
right?
I think so.
We'll come back to it later, but I do think it's important to say that movie kind of influenced the way a lot of people think about Lizzie.
Yes, no one has ever come to her defense or tried to unpack it in any different way. But I was going to sort of set up the scene of Fall River. So Fall River, Massachusetts was a huge textile town, and it was a cotton manufacturing town that rivaled like England. I think Manchester, England was the second biggest one. Apparently the town's official motto was, "We'll try," because they had survived a fire in 1843.
We'll try.
That's so like low
Oh my
bar.
God. That might beat Trenton.
Trenton makes and the world takes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, we're striving for mediocrity, and that's okay. This murder, the Lizzie Borden murder, was the first big murder of the Gilded Age and also the second biggest thing to happen to Massachusetts after the Salem witch trials.
And it feels almost like an OJ.
Exactly.
It became a huge deal, and
It
people
was a
were going
huge
bananas.
trial. And also this town, there was like the incredible wealth was amassed by all kinds of people. There's a lot of political corruption, a lot of business corruption going on. So the family, as you said, they lived on 2nd Street, which is sort of like the low rent area of Fall River. Where you really wanted to live was up on the hill.
And it was sort of a busy street.
It was
too.
a busy
So
street.
it would have been hard to like get away with some big crime.
Yeah, I mean, everything was there. It was like the main street, up in the hills where all the rich people looked down.
Yeah.
And at this time, because of all the cotton manufacturing and whatnot, there was a huge onslaught of Irish immigrants coming in. And a lot of Portuguese fishermen were coming in.
And people looked down on a lot of them.
Yes.
The Irish were pretty like shat on pretty badly, I think, right?
Yeah, well, Irish need not apply.
Yeah,
That was all over
yeah.
the place. You know, and my great-grandmother was actually a ward boss in Philadelphia
Is that
from
right?
Ireland.
What's a ward boss?
She kind of like handled the neighborhood politics
Oh,
of
wow.
like North Philly. When people came in from Ireland, they would come to her like, "I'd like to have a job as this or that."
Yeah.
And she would suss it out. She was also like 6'5", an imposing woman.
Wow.
My mother called her the ugliest woman she ever saw, which, you know, it's something. So anyway, they lived on 2nd Street, and Lizzie was a little pissy because they had money. She's got this stepmom, her sister. She wants to live up on the hill, you know. Now indoor plumbing is getting introduced. They're not doing that.
And he's rich.
He's rich.
And they have to like shit in a chamber pot or something and empty it in a latrine.
No one wants to do that.
I guess that we're kind of getting to the why she is possibly guilty. Like, what could the motives possibly be?
there's
That was
absolutely-
one.
And also, if you look at the way that women were dressed at the time,
Yeah,
it's very confining with the corsets and all that type of stuff.
right.
And also even dealing with women's issues and having to deal with a chamber pot, as I speak euphemistically about
Are you
menstruation.
talking about? Yeah, I was going to ask.
talking
Didn't
about
you
her
once
period.
want to do a menstruation movie?
I did. It was called Ragtime.
Oh, right.
Didn't go down very well with my family. So anyway, so her mother died at 40 when Lizzie was 2. And her mother died from complications of like uterine and like everything.
Yeah.
And then her father married 3 years later.
And Abby was the new wife.
The new wife, 5 years younger than her father. And I think he probably, you know, spent a lot of money on her as opposed to his daughters.
And that's another like motive that people give for maybe why they think she did it, because she was afraid the father was going to change a will
exactly.
to give money to Abby and not to the sisters.
To the daughters, exactly.
But that's kind of disputed a little bit. And also people in a cliche way don't like their step parents. So that's like a whole stereotype.
Hence that movie Step Monster starring Julia Roberts
I
and
never
Susan
saw
Sarandon.
that one.
You don't need to see it. I saw it for you.
Thank you.
So anyway, so you have like a burgeoning new town.
Yeah.
We're on the brink of the Industrial Revolution, and she's interested in theater and whatnot, and yet she's like stuck on 2nd Street, with not a workable toilet, and, her stepmom's getting the day diamonds, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We understand she's frustrated. So,
Allegedly.
Allegedly frustrated, yes. Okay, so you can throw in your allegedly.
I'm sorry, you can tell I'm like a little like skeptical, but
Well, you're welcome to be.
thank you.
So the day of the incident.
And it was August 4th.
Yes, 1892. So it's August. It's hot. The only other person in the house, her sister Emma, we think was away.
Yes.
Her father's out of the house.
In the morning.
And her stepmother's home. And the only other person there is the maid. Her name is Bridget.
She calls her Maggie.
Maggie.
Seems like almost like a slur.
Well, that's like when people call me Mary instead of Kathy, because I'm like,
right.
Not all Catholics are named Mary.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, Bridget Sullivan is her name, but she calls her Maggie. She is an Irish immigrant who's working for them and lives with them.
Yeah.
She is outside washing windows.
Oh, and everybody had been sick that
morning. The night before, there was some sort of, they had kept the mutton stew too long, so it was
something. I mean, that was
rancid.
In the movie. I also heard there was like milk that might have
gone bad. It was mutton that gone bad and meat had gone rancid.
So people were like vomiting.
And the other thing too is the father encouraged them to eat it. Like he was that cheap. Like, it's meat. It's fine. You'll live. So Lizzie is home alone with her stepmother inside, and Maggie or Bridget is outside washing windows. And so Lizzie's stepmother, someone comes in and hacks her up.
And I think what happened too is that people didn't really know that the stepmother had died because she was upstairs. So she had been killed earlier, but nobody knew it yet. So the father came in at some point around like 11:30 or something. He sits down and then he gets hacked to death. And then Lizzie finds his body all chopped up.
Exactly.
And then ultimately they go upstairs and they see the stepmother is dead too.
Well, Lizzie was wise because the night before the murders, she went next door and she talked to a neighbor, Alice Russell.
Right.
And she said to Alice, there's been some strange characters hanging around our house. They're looking for money from my father. I'm a little worried.
So you think she planted that?
I think so. Set the scene up like there's dangerous folks watching us.
There were witnesses that said that there was like some weird smelly guy with an overcoat and like someone who was covering his face with a hat in a carriage.
Sounds like James Toback, the director.
That guy.
I met him on 72nd Street once.
Yeah.
So most murders, 60 to 70%, are done by someone the victim knew, right?
Close relative, as a friend.
The idea of Nicole Brown getting killed by some stranger just
randomly,
made no sense. But there's always a possibility.
A perfect storm of events that created an event to happen that way. Sometimes it's just as strange as it seems.
And there was also this guy, John Morse, was the brother of the stepmother, who apparently had stayed there the night before, but left in the morning and then came back after the murders. He's an odd guy, too. So that was one of the possible suspects.
So that sort of planted a seed of doubt in your head.
Well, not only that, but I do think it's important to realize that there should be a murder weapon and a motive. And I do think there's a good chance she killed them. Do also, and we can get to it later, the idea of the blood.
Well, that's the interesting thing. So her friend, the neighbor Alice Russell, when Lizzie discovered the bodies, or they were discovered, Alice Russell was there, and then they called the police. Now, Alice Russell witnessed Lizzie burning a dress.
That was a few days later, yeah.
Later on during the trial, she forgot to mention that.
Right.
Because there was no hatchets.
But they said that there was paint on the dress or something.
She said it was paint.
Right.
So the curious thing is, where's the hatchet? Where's the bloody clothing? Where's any of that type of stuff? Which could bring us into our made-for-TV movie with Elizabeth Montgomery. Because that's very peculiar. So the one thing that everyone sort of approached so gingerly, I guess, is that Lizzie doesn't look like a killer. A person from a well-to-do family who's well-dressed, they don't kill. They certainly don't commit patricide. And women aren't killers. So there was always the benefit of the doubt there because they're like, she's just too nice for that to happen. So Emma comes back and she hires all the best lawyers.
Right. The former governor of Massachusetts was
Exactly.
one of the
Yes.
defense lawyers.
And the attorney general at the time was just dragging his feet because he's like, oh, I don't want to even get into this stuff. And her defense attorney even said she was too dainty to wield a hatchet. And she was modest. And this was completely out of character for her. It's culturally inconceivable that someone who's this well-bred would commit such a heinous crime. And also the other thing, too, is this the rise of the suffragist movement. So a bunch of New England suffragists came behind, rallied for her.
There were religious people who did it as well.
Exactly. And this is when the Seven Sister Schools were all coming together. Like, women were getting educations. And they're realizing, like, oh, women have minds. Bryn Mawr, Barnard, Mount Holyoke, Smith, Vassar, all those fun places with those fun gals.
Right.
So they're kind of really like, oh, women have brains and they're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So she ended up spending, I think, a year in jail.
There was another thing that happened before she went to jail. Somebody asked her about her stepmother after the killings happened. I don't know, it was something about, they said, your mother and not stepmother. And Lizzie was like, she's not my mother, she's my stepmother. She could have just been correcting them. And apparently Lizzie did call her mom or mother early in her life and decided to change and call her by her name, which I guess could have been seen as like they didn't have a great relationship, and they probably didn't have the best relationship.
I think Lizzie also was probably a bit of a flinty character to get along with anyway.
Yeah, she was unique. Well, in the movie, getting to the Elizabeth Montgomery movie, someone at one point says, "You're special." And I was wondering what they were kind of getting at. Like, I was wondering if, like, she was kind of, like, neurodivergent or something like that.
It could be.
She was, like, serene and calm, and people got mad also because she didn't, like, cry. And, like, although she did, apparently.
There was a rumor that she went to a drugstore to buy some sort of drug that creates tears.
Oh, interesting. But there was also a thing that she bought poison. She was going to kill them with poison, and that's why people were sick in the first place. And the bodies, they sent the stomachs to like Harvard to study if they were poisoned. And they also cut the heads off. And
Oh, wow.
The heads go to Yale, the stomachs go to Harvard.
Exactly.
Hopefully they're going in the right direction. It was also interesting because she was in jail for a year. And by the time it went to trial, they actually presented her father's skull as a piece of evidence, which would have been something to see. The trial lasted for 12 days. As it went on, Lizzie appreciated the attention. She started dressing in more colorful outfits. And the jury had to be brought in from out of town.
Mm-hmm.
They were mostly men. They came up with the verdict immediately, acquitted her, but they waited an hour because, like, it looks better that way.
Right.
So that was basically done and done.
Well, there was no case. The people who were prosecuting her really screwed up over and over. Like, they made this whole deal about the axes, because there were some axes
in the house. But there was also a rumor that she had shoplifted a hatchet from a hardware store.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. But
That's a hard thing to smuggle out of a store.
They did say it had to have been a new axe because a piece of metal from the axe was found in the brain. But the big thing I think that came up over and over was just like, if you hack someone to death with an axe or a hatchet, what happens with the blood? And there was blood spattered all over, like even on a painting in the house and the walls. And experts said, yeah, an artery, a big artery would cause the blood not just to spatter, it would like shoot out.
Projectile.
And like whoever killed her would be covered from like the body to the legs. This all happened in a half an hour?
Yes.
How is it possible?
Well, how does one person get hacked in a house without another person hearing it?
They could have been killed before.
How do they know about seeing her washing a dress if it didn't come up at trial?
Her neighbor, Alice Russell, she was interviewed by the police because she was the neighbor that came over. She failed to tell them that Lizzie was dressed and fine, but while they were talking, she watched Lizzie burn a dress, and Lizzie said there was paint on it or something like that. So she got rid of it. So that sat for a year. That was never in any of the evidence. So later on, when the trial, came to me, she's like, oh, she went to the cops and go, I forgot to tell you. That day I came over, Lizzie was burning a dress.
There was so much confusion in the trial about what dress she wore. It also just seems like even if she changed,
Wouldn't she be covered in blood?
she'd still have blood
If
all
they don't
over,
have
and they don't have plumbing.
plumbing. Well, the other thing, too, is that when she was arrested by immigrant Irish policemen.
Mhm.
And she just said, I'm not going with these people.
Right.
These people are beneath me. I'm not going with them. So she made everything difficult across the board, across the way. So I think she was just a major pain in the ass. It'd be like arresting Sharon Osbourne for something. You're like, I don't care. You can get away with it. Just get out of my face.
Just make this situation end.
There are many holes here that just are there.
The only other detail that seems weird, and I can't tell if it's noteworthy or not, the mutton thing, like the fact that everybody was like kind of violently ill is interesting. And I don't know if it's just a footnote or something that sort of like foretold this going down in some way.
I think it was from the TV movie we watched.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the dad was so cheap that he was just like, I don't care if it's turning rancid, it's food, still eat it. And also it meant that other people were like ill and kind of down and like not on top of their game as far
And
as
it was
observation.
100 degrees.
And it was
so
hot
I'm
as
sure
hell.
getting
God.
sick was probably the norm.
Of course.
But
everyone
I
was-
also think, I'm not positive it was the mutton that made them ill. Like it could have been milk or just
Yeah.
some random virus. Remember, it was like the 19th century. So
exactly.
But one thing about the blood, last thing about the blood, and then we'll get to the Montgomery movie. Not only would the dress have blood on it, but the axe would also have blood on it. And they found like a head of an axe or a hatchet that didn't have a handle. And the police was trying to say that that was the murder weapon, but they didn't know what happened to the handle. But then there was wood that was part of the head, and that didn't have blood on it either. Anyway, the police really screwed up.
Well, they screwed up. And also her crime scene cleanup is very impressive.
It would have been impossible in that
Yeah.
age to really clean up the blood from her body if she
Exactly.
did it.
So the rumor is, so she's already acquitted of this. He was a Portuguese fisherman. It was people
Right.
looking for money.
Blaming foreigners.
Exactly. So Gideon and I had the pleasure of watching this movie from 1975 called The Legend of Lizzie Borden. And it stars Elizabeth Montgomery, the beautiful Elizabeth
From
Montgomery
Bewitched.
from Bewitched.
And this was after Bewitched, like the 60s?
I think it was the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, wow.
It's also starring as Emma, her homely sister, is Catherine Hellman, who was on Who's the Boss? But she also was in Brazil. Very
Oh,
interesting
right.
career. The Irish maid Bridget was played by Fionnuala Flanagan, who is an Irish actress. This must have been her first film. She's beautiful.
Yeah.
So we both watched this film, and my instinct when I watched it, it looked like they took the set of Little House on the Prairie and they stuck it in the Santa Monica Mountains because you could see the mountains, but
Right.
Fall River had no mountains.
Right.
It's also shot almost like a Roman Polanski film.
Yeah.
Long stairs, hard
Right.
stairs.
Slow, like push-ins.
Like
yeah.
you're constantly on the brink of discovering something, but
Right.
nothing is discovered.
And there's a little like clue in there too. Like
Yes.
she's on morphine and there's like some weird trippy stuff.
And they do some flashbacks to her having an incestuous moment with her father.
And they did that a couple of times, and I don't think that really existed.
There was something where she was making out with her father, who was working as a mortician while she touched a dead body
And
simultaneously.
then there's a thing that she kissed him on the lips in his coffin too.
Also, flashbacks to her committing the crimes where
Right.
she undressed fully naked.
Well, that was also a real theory. Like a
Yes.
lot of newspapers at the time had crazy theories about how it must have happened. And one of them was that she undressed, and they must have come across it and just went with it.
Well, I think it was also for Elizabeth Montgomery, who was living the life of Bewitched.
Yeah,
This is suddenly she gets to play a murderess.
totally.
Yeah, we get to see her naked from behind.
Yeah.
It was 3 channels at the time, so this was a big
Right.
deal for her to break out in this role.
The interesting thing is that as it plays out, they kind of do like keep to the facts pretty well.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they make this decision. And I don't think it's bad that we're spoiling it. We all know people have had their chance to watch that movie. But they basically put a hatchet in her hand and they show the flashback. It's like a whodunit, where at the end they're like, here's what really happened. Apparently, that movie was a big deal. It won awards. It had a lot of buzz. And it really painted Lizzie Borden as like guilty. There are Halloween costumes. She became this kind of like scary character. Nobody ever gave her the benefit of the doubt.
Everyone assumed. It's true. The house they lived on 2nd Street is now a bed and breakfast. You can stay there, but it's also part of like haunted hotel
Right.
tours around America
Of
if you want to do
course.
that. And then Lizzie and Emma did end up moving up onto the hill.
After this
After
all
and they
happened.
got all the money was left to them. And Lizzie was a big fan of the arts. So she would go to see theater crews in Boston and invite them home to party.
Right.
And she did fall in love, or she had a crush on this actress named Nance O'Neill. I don't know how much more Irish sounding you can get than that. But that was the straw that broke the camel's back for Emma. Her sister's like, yeah, you can hang our parents up, but if you're bringing in these theater people, I'm out of here.
Apparently, there's a place in Manhattan in Gramercy Park called the Players Club, which is the former home of Edwin Booth.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of a haven for New York actors. They have a lot of history there.
Yeah.
And one of my former directors in high school gives tours there. And they have a thing about, it's Nance O'Neill.
Nance O'Neill,
And how she had a thing with
Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden.
So Lizzie Borden lived, like in her later days, she lived well. She entertained the crowds.
Yeah.
Probably enjoyed a sapphic lifestyle, shall I say?
Yeah. But I'm sure it was hard. Like, I do think people twittered about her behind her back for her entire life.
But I think they probably always did. And at that point, if you won, you won, right? So you don't
Guess
care.
so.
And she wasn't really interested in those folks anyway.
Right.
I think she wanted more of the theater crowd. Then she died at 1927 at the age of 66. And I think her sister died like within a week of her, but they still were estranged.
Right. She died 9 days later,
Yeah,
Emma.
exactly.
Yeah, they kind of had a falling out. So you think she's definitely guilty. She did it.
I think the thing that's so curious to me, and this is like, I'm going to bring in a modern day case.
Yeah.
But the Kohlberger case.
The Idaho.
The Idaho students were murdered apparently in their house.
Right.
4 people were killed. 2 people were sleeping or whatever. But how do you stab someone to death? One person.
Yeah. And someone else would have found out about it while it's
do
happening.
you knock them out?
Well, that was one of the theories in Lizzie Borden,
Exactly.
too, that she put ether on them and made them fall asleep. Yeah, and the guy who did that, the Idaho case, he
Kohlberger.
came from across the country, right?
Yes.
And he's like some PhD in criminology. So I guess he had the brains
But it's interesting
to
that he
figure
could
something
go into
out.
a house of 6 people, manage to kill 4 of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you were in a house and you heard someone screaming in the next room, would you
Yeah.
just be like,
Well, also,
Put the headphones
again,
on?
it was a busy street in the Lizzie Borden. I don't know about in Idaho, but
Yeah.
like you'd think the neighbors would hear something of somebody screaming. To kill someone on the top floor and then downstairs, it's like going to be tough. You'd think maybe there were 2 people. Are you saying that it is possible?
I think that, well, we've accepted that she's guilty.
Yeah.
Even though she was acquitted, that's what society.
It's more fun to think she did it.
It's more fun to
and
think she
seeing
did it.
Elizabeth Montgomery with an axe is fun.
Oh, and not smiling.
You have a connection to Elizabeth Montgomery,
I
right?
do.
Just tell that quickly.
Okay, so one of the first films I worked on was called The Panama Deception. It was about the 1989 invasion of Panama documentary. It ended up winning an Oscar, but Elizabeth Montgomery was the narrator of it. And that really put her out there with all the commie pinkos. Like, she was never political.
In Bewitched, she seems kind of like subservient.
Well, she was also Hollywood royalty. Her father was Robert Montgomery.
Oh,
So she grew up in the Hollywood system.
I see.
But she was actually a huge activist, no nukes, Jane Fonda type.
Ah.
I did get to interact with her over the phone, and she did call herself Lizzie.
Oh, my God.
Oh, interesting.
But do we think she's a bad Elizabeth because she put out this image of Lizzie Borden and kind of ruined her?
I don't think people were thinking that deeply at
You
that
can't
time.
blame the
You can't.
actor also.
Like, if you look at any Ryan Murphy series of Versace, the Menendez brothers and stuff, it might be too soon for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And also, we have much more information now. They didn't back then.
Yeah.
I think it was brave of her to take a role of a villain versus being America's
Right.
sweetheart. But she was lovely, and her name was Lizzie when she
seemed
would call.
amazing.
Yeah, she was sweet.
So this is an interesting one in terms of determining whether she's bad or not. You have to declare if she's guilty or not.
Exactly.
And it sort of reminds me a little bit of the Karen Reed thing.
Oh.
That just happened, right?
Karen Reed is beautiful, and beautiful women don't do this type of thing. She doesn't need to do that. You know,
Right.
I was really surprised that she got away with it. But I think there is similarities there that, she's a pretty woman. She's articulate. She's charming. She smiles in court. And I think Lizzie was doing the same thing.
And I do think the Lizzie Borden thing, like a lot of other more modern cases, was kind of tried in the public.
Yeah, the court of public opinion.
But I think that's such an American thing, and it is really sad. You know, men are supposed to be stoic, and women, like, if she didn't cry enough, that was like a huge, like, criticism of her over and over. And I read part of a book that was making a case for her innocence, and it was just crazy how they were all like saying she didn't cry enough and didn't show enough emotion. And there's all these like roles that society puts us in, and it's so unfair. And all these papers, the Boston Globe was so terrible. They would all make up shit that like helped them sell papers.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing when you sort of looked at the rise of like MSNBC or Fox News or
Yeah.
CNN, 24-hour news, where
Right.
like I worked for there, we're like, let's get a body language expert on.
Right.
A body language expert?
know.
Who has that job?
Yeah.
The thing that I was thinking, if we're thinking of Lizzie as bad or good, like I was looking at some of, during the research, there's a guy, Jans Ludwig, I guess he's Dutch.
Hmm.
He's a University of Chicago professor who focuses on economics and crime. And he kind of has a theory about crime and violence, about cognitive modes. So there's fast, automatic, and intuitive, like road rage. Like, why'd you hack that
Right.
guy? Piss me off, badoo. There's expressive violence and planned violence.
Hmm.
The second one, which is planned violence, is slow, effortful, and analytical, which I think is Lizzie. So I think if she did commit these crimes, and I believe she did, that she's of the latter. She planned
Right.
it. She was planning her escape.
And also the anger was building over years and
course.
years.
But I forgot to tell you
Yeah.
these two things. So Lizzie did have cases in the past where she,
Lizzie Borden?
yes, where
Oh.
people died on her.
What?
Whoa.
One was she was visiting a friend. They were very, very close friends. Her friend got sick while she was visiting.
Oh, wow.
Her friend also had a living will,
Huh.
and the living will was changed in
Oh.
Lizzie's favor.
This definitely happened, yeah?
They said this
Wow.
happened. At another time, she was with a neighbor she would sit with who died on her, and she also apparently, Lizzie was a shoplifter, stole some
Oh,
jewelry
really?
from
Wow.
them.
Crazy.
So Lizzie, there was another time where they claimed that people had robbed the house and stole jewelry that they pinned on Lizzie too.
But that is really interesting because the inheritance, it was kind of the main thing occurring to me, other than bitterness, because they ended up inheriting the father's money, right?
Yes, and the money that would have gone to the stepmother.
So those are the two, that's like killing the president and the vice president. Like the two
Right.
people in line were killed.
Yes.
Apparently, the cops made a big deal about how Lizzie wanted the will changed, but they didn't check to see if he actually did have a will, and apparently he didn't even have one yet.
Yeah. I think the thing at the time, too, is like women had so little agency then,
Yeah.
right? She had no income of her own. She probably wanted to be a theater person.
Yeah.
She had no relationship with her stepmom, and she just thought, this is a means to an end.
And it was funny in the movie, in the weird Elizabeth Montgomery movie, it was funny how, like, the father would call her girl and stuff. Like, she was, like, 5 years old, and Lizzie Borden was actually in her 30s, but Elizabeth Montgomery was in her 40s in the movie. So to see this guy, like, being like, my girl, it was so weird.
Well, also, Lizzie Borden was an 1890s 30, so she probably
True.
looked 70.
That's a good point. She didn't age
Lizzie
very well.
Montgomery.
And living in a house without toilets.
Yeah, that ages
That'll
you.
make you look pretty
That
shitty.
ages
For,
you.
for some reason, and I think because I was trying to think of a movie that made such a big impression and it was kind of like impossible to ignore as far as the public's view of somebody. And I think Mommy Dearest might be the one that comes to mind as far as just like that defined, because that was Joan Crawford, was that
Yes.
Right.
For a lot of people, that is Joan Crawford.
Because Joan Crawford was this really well-respected actress, right?
She was known to be very difficult, but i.e., what is difficult for a female actress? She
Right.
wanted to have some say.
But did people know she was that horrible?
Oh, they knew that she was very difficult. But Mommy Dearest is based on Christina Crawford, her adopted
Right.
daughter's
Adopted.
wow.
daughter's account of her childhood.
Does anybody think that the whole step-parent thing, like the way Disney deals with it, is fair? I mean, is there a stereotype going on in the media, or is it a real thing?
It's so interesting because it was a big deal to have a stepmother back. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it was stepmother or stepfather via death, right? You didn't divorce. That didn't
Right.
happen. Coming back to Lizzie, yeah, I mean, I think she got away with murder.
Yeah, sure. If she's guilty, she's bad.
I don't feel like from all the testimonies, she didn't show a lot of remorse, nor did her sister.
But if you're innocent, why would you show remorse? And apparently she did cry at like
Well, she lost her
the
father.
funerals and stuff.
Once all that business was done and she was acquitted, she
Yeah.
was like, we're moving up the hill. We're getting some plumbing. And I
Right.
got this theater troupe from Boston coming in, and we're going to party through the weekend.
Yeah,
You know
but
what I
she
mean?
might have just been like, that was a big ordeal. Let's have fun.
So if that movie hadn't have happened, would people still be talking about Lizzie Borden? Would people, like if you made a Lizzie Borden reference, would people know what you're talking about?
I mean, I think certain people are legends no matter what, even if they didn't make these movies, because it was such a big deal.
Well, it's like Jack the Ripper.
And O.J. Simpson, and they're these iconic characters. The case takes on a life of their own.
Well, OJ was acquitted. Do you think he did it?
Well, I do. I definitely do. But just to answer your question, I do think people would remember her, but I think she was tarnished by the movie.
Gotcha.
I think there would be more of a question, and there might be fewer kids dressing up like her for Halloween with like a bloody axe.
It's pretty hard to put in a flashback of doing the thing.
It's at the very end, they show her hacking her mom, her dad, or her stepmom, whatever. So she's naked. She washes all the blood out. I mean, wouldn't she drag the blood down to the basement? Like, there's
no plumbing.
She would not be able to get away with what they said she did in this movie. And then she takes the axe and she drops it down the latrine. And like the cops didn't think to like look for an axe in that shitter.
Well, no one wants to look down there, right?
A detective wouldn't, but maybe the street cop would.
The Irish immigrant cops.
Exactly.
If we're accepting the premise that she did in fact do it, does the extenuating circumstances, do they rise to the level where it's understandable or no?
Being like abused.
Yeah.
If she killed them because he was creepy and a jerk, that's a little less bad than killing him for his money, right?
I think she did do it for the money, and I think she knew she could get away with it. And I think that she also was frustrated as a lesbian.
Right.
She was just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
What do I have to lose?
Right. I'm miserable as I am in the way I'm living.
It's not
I
gonna
want to
get
live
better.
a different life, and my father's making me shit in a pot.
Exactly. And he's going to probably leave all his money to this chick.
Yeah.
So, no, I think she did it. It was a crime. It was basically of greed.
Yeah, no good. She's bad if she did it.
And you know what? She probably doesn't mind that.
Right. Well, nobody's going to dress up like me for Halloween.
You don't know that yet, Gideon. We have...
I could kill somebody
You
and
still
then
have
they
time.
would.
It's just interesting also in this day and age how an image can change on a dime in a day.
Right.
But Lizzie, I think she did it. I think she knew she did it. She acknowledged she did it. And she probably got drunk and joked about it with her theater
With a bunch
friends.
of actors,
They probably reenacted it.
Yeah.
With Nance O'Neill.
Well, that's excellent. Really interesting stuff. To give us more insight into the world of Lizzie Borden, we are joined by Rick Rebelo, an award-winning documentary filmmaker and professor who grew up down the street from Lizzie Borden's house in Fall River, Massachusetts. His film Lizbeth, A Victorian Nightmare, explores the grisly murders and subsequent sensational trial, and it can be seen on YouTube.
Welcome, Rick. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
How did you end up in Fall River, Massachusetts?
My parents, like many of the immigrants who came to Fall River, we were leaving a dictatorship in the Azores in Portugal. And Fall River offered a lot of paying jobs in mills for immigrants, for people who, didn't have exactly the mastery of the English language or an education. So a lot of people from my island came here to work in either textiles or different other things that the city offered.
So when did you first come across the Lizzie Borden fanfare? You were a young boy.
To be honest, I have no recollection of a time where I didn't know about Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Borden is so much a part of Fall River. The first house my parents bought was on 3rd Street in Fall River, which is 1 block from the famous Lizzie Borden house where her parents, had their sad demise. So living literally in that neighborhood, right away, you heard about Lizzie Borden. You heard about, the whole jump rope song, and everybody in school was saying Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. So I don't think I ever remember a period of time where I wasn't sort of immersed in it.
What's your take on it? Did she do it?
So people ask me this all the time. And based on years and years and years and years of studying true crime and psychological profiling, I think it's very likely that she did it or knew who did it, because the intensity of the murder I mean, there wasn't exactly 40 whacks. That's a folktale. But for someone to kill somebody with that level of aggression, usually there has to be some sort of very personal anger that that person has towards the person they're killing. I always say to people, somebody that came to rob the family jewels wasn't going to hit, Mr. and Mrs. Borden that many times with a weapon. They clunk them on the head, take the family jewels and leave. So I think that she's most likely, but am I sure? No.
People brought up some other suspects. Can you talk about that? Like the illegitimate son, his brother-in-law?
Right. Yeah. There's an infamous story about a Billy Borden, which most Lizzie Borden scholars almost immediately toss that one away. The other person that I think has even a little bit of credence is her uncle, John V. Morris, because he might have had motivation of dealing with her father and some business dealings that the Bordens had. Andrew Borden, Lizzie's father, was sort of a notorious curmudgeon. He's sort of a Ebenezer Scrooge type, both in the way he looked and the way he behaved. So he was not, very popular. John Morris is probably the only other one that anyone could even think of that might even have an actual motive for killing Andrew.
So just tell us a little bit about Lizzie, a day in the life, what she did, because this was the Victorian age. One of the defenses is that she couldn't possibly, she was a proper lady.
Right. I mean, Lizzie was a churchgoer, even though, Lizzie was already sort of notorious by the time the murders happened. She was a spinster. Both her and her sister were spinsters. They were in their 30s and unmarried, which back then was already questionable. She had done a lot of work at the church, but there had been questions about her, robbing things from the local pharmacy and doing all kinds of stuff. Oddly enough, her alibi for the murder was that she was looking for fishing sinkers in the barn, and then she lost track of time and she started eating pears. And the next thing she knew, she found her father dead in the house. Lizzie had a lot of angst, as I can't say young women because she wasn't a young woman, but as daughters might who still live with their parents, certainly later on in life, Lizzie saw a lot of women of her age going to fancy parties, Victorian parties in the northern part of Fall River, which is known as the Hill. The Borden house is sort of in the central part of Fall River. People like to say the south end, but it's really kind of in the middle. And Fall River is stratified. The way the mill owners did it, it was kind of insidious, where their houses were way at the top of the hill. And as you were economically set is where you were set in the topography.
So the top of the hill was the good place to be.
Yeah, that's where the rich and privileged lived. It's almost like when you think of sort of what's happening today in America and what happened right before the stock market crash 100 years ago, there really was two completely different worlds. The Fall River of the North was very Victorian, very posh, fabulous parties and galas and all that stuff. And then once you got to the southern part of Fall River, now you have all these immigrants from different countries. At that time, they were down there and they stayed down there. It was really almost a very fascistic sort of setup. And Lizzie being stuck literally in the middle gave her a lot of angst and sort of frustration because she identified as being one of the upper crust, even though literally where she landed on the map denied her that. And it's by no mistake that after her parents died and she got the money, that she not immediately, but soon after moved up into the Highlands.
We talk about her frustration. Her father had money.
Yes.
So we know that she was a frustrated woman.
Correct.
The thing that I thought that was really interesting from watching your film, first of all, why did you make this film?
Well, I had grown up in Fall River my entire life. So Lizzie Borden was always something that was, around me and part of my life. At the time, I was getting my master's degree at Rhode Island College. I have a master's in media studies, so I wanted to do a documentary film. My professor at Bristol Community College was Jules Reichelbusch, who was considered, one of the foremost authorities on Lizzie Borden at the time. And my film professor at Bristol Community College was Ken Souza, who had done a documentary as well. So I was surrounded by all these people. And at the time, I had done a series of television shows called Dark New England, where I traveled to haunted and paranormal attractions all over New England. I had called the people who had owned the house at the time to see if they would be a part of it. And at that time, the owner had no interest. But when Leanne Wilbur co-purchased the house, she was so inclusive and she brought so many people in. So I found this gigantic community of people.
You had many people, experts featured in your film.
Yeah.
You said there was a lot of warring factions. Like,
Yes,
everyone's got their opinion. Can you tell me a little bit about that sort of buzz around town, even currently?
It's fascinating in that there's so much debate over something that cannot be proved factually. We simply don't have the material anymore to prove this case beyond a shadow of a doubt. We don't have genetics. We don't have anything we can work with. So there's always been this turmoil amongst Lizzie Borden historians as to, this person's theory is this, or this person's theory is that, or this person stole my theory, or they stole my research. And it's funny, my professor, when I was doing the film for the master's, said that I would have had a more compelling film if I had done a film about trying to make the film, because so many people were arguing, and I'd get an email saying, if you put this person in, you got to take me out, or if this person talks, I don't want to talk. And it was a balance of trying to keep everybody, happy. As you know, I have it up for free on YouTube. It was on around PBS for a decade. So I've never been one to try to profit from it. But I think for a lot of people who do sort of profit from this story, or they try to create a living from the story, they get very protective.
That's really interesting to me, how the town is fueled by the legend. Watching your film, one of the fascinating things that I learned, Lizzie Borden was one of the first AP Wire stories.
Yes.
People were suddenly reading the trial on a daily basis, pre-OJ.
Right.
This is our yellow journalism come to America.
It's interesting you bring that up, because Jules Reicherbus, who was my communications professor, often cited the O.J. Simpson case, because that was, when I was in school, that was going on at the time. And he talked about the similarities and the correlations between O.J. and Lizzie. Lizzie was the first true crime story that did go coast to coast in the United States because of the AP Wire, and because it was so scandalous. This woman who's supposed to be a genteel Victorian woman may or may not have killed her parents in this unbelievably violent way. It was almost felt like a fiction at the time. It felt fantastical. So it became fodder for people around the country and around the world to read about. And it drew readers in, like the OJ case. Nowadays you see the situation with P. Diddy and his trial. And recently in Massachusetts, we had another woman.
The Karen Reed trial, yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about Lizzie's life post-trial and her life as a spinster.
Right.
How are her remaining years? I know that she liked the theatrical set. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, Lizzie was close friends with a woman named Nance O'Neill, who was a Broadway performer. And the scuttlebutt is that she had a relationship with Nance O'Neill. Now, Nance O'Neill, I can't imagine how many women were out as being lesbian in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but Nance O'Neill was. So that added kind of fuel to the debate about whether or not Lizzie Borden was in fact a lesbian. And Lizzie, she moved to Maplecroft, which is her Victorian mansion in Fall River, in the north end of Fall River. And she kind of held court there. She didn't get out much. She loved her dogs. She loved her company. She was willing to spend some money to bring people in to entertain her. And that's what she did.
So why do you think people are so fascinated by this?
One of them is the time period, the fact that it was the Victorian era. And the aesthetics are very important, I think, to the popularity of Lizzie Borden. Because a lot of the people who are attracted to Lizzie Borden want to put on those clothes. They want those aesthetics. They want to go to the house. There's something about Victorian crime, whether it's Lizzie Borden, whether it's Sherlock Holmes, whether it's Jack the Ripper. There's something very romanticized about that. It allows people to play in something pretty gruesome, but in a beautiful setting, or what they perceive as a beautiful setting. They think Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, they think of those settings. And Lizzie, she's just right there, For the women that I've met that have been Lizzie Borden fans, I think a big attraction to Lizzie was the fact that she tried to have agency in a time when women didn't have agency.
I would agree. Let's get back to Fall River, how Lizzie Borden drives that town.
I'll let you in on some inside baseball. So, like I said, I was really good friends with Leanne Wilbur, and she would often lament to me the troubles that she had with the city, because the city fathers don't like being associated with Lizzie Borden, even though she drives tourists and commerce to the town. Ironically, they're more obsessed with selling the history of the mills, which killed way more innocent people than Lizzie Borden was ever even thought of killing. For instance, there was a sign on the Braga Bridge to let people know that they were getting into Fall River, where Lizzie Borden's bed and breakfast was. They took that down. I mean, Leanne often would tell me that she wanted to just pick up the house by the roots and move it to Salem where they would appreciate it.
True.
And with Maplecroft, the house that she spent her life in, the city has constantly fought anyone who has tried to turn that into a bed and breakfast or a museum. Maplecroft is gorgeous. Lizzie didn't move there by mistake. If you go to the house on 2nd Street and you go to Maplecroft, you will totally understand why she wanted to live in Maplecroft. The house on 2nd Street is small. It's very claustrophobic. Maplecroft is huge. It's a sprawling Victorian mansion. And the city won't let anybody make $1.01 on that house. Now, let me say one thing with a caveat. When I say the city, I don't mean the Fall River Historical Society. The Fall River Historical Society is absolutely the place to go to for Lizzie Borden information. They are stupendous. Michael Martins and Dennis Bennett are incredible. And Dr. Stephanie Curry works on Lizzie Borden stuff there as well. The Fall River Historical Society, not even the house, the Historical Society is where you need to go.
So let's go back to Lizzie Borden with pop culture. I think you've seen the 1975 Elizabeth Montgomery movie.
Absolutely.
What were your thoughts about that?
The movie brought up the debate about whether or not Lizzie took off her clothes to kill her parents. That's why there was no blood anywhere and she would wash, right? I'm a huge fan of 1970s television horror movies. So that movie is 100% my taste. Elizabeth Montgomery was fabulous in it.
I think she was nominated for an Emmy.
Yeah.
So the premise of this is Bad Elizabeth. She's a Lizzie Andrew Borden.
Yeah.
Do you think she was bad?
I think she had bad inclinations. Like I said, she had problems with stealing and doing all kinds of other things, But the other aspect of that is, people wonder whether or not she was molested. People wonder whether or not Andrew Borden had molested his daughters.
There was a scene in that movie, yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the murders, that's the type of anger that would be associated with someone who was sexually assaulted, Would she have just killed him simply because they had a land dispute and her father was unwilling to buy her more expensive dresses and things? I don't know. I mean, but that's why Lizzie Borden still fascinates 100 and plus years later, is because we don't know. That's kind of the whole thing. We don't know and we're not sure. And that's why we still debate over it. And that's why the people who debate get very upset and very focused about it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
A big thank you to Rick Rebelo for all his Lizzie Borden insights. If you want more information on Lizzie Borden, you can find that in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Bad Elizabeth. Please rate and review the show on places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We are Bad Elizabeth Pod on Instagram and Substack.
We really want this podcast to be a conversation with our listeners. Feel free to email us at badelizabethpod@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. They can be good or bad. Just don't be indifferent.
Bad Elizabeth is recorded at Jet Road Studios. It is hosted by me, Gideon Evans.
And me, Kathy Egan Taylor. It is produced and engineered by Will Beckton, and our executive producer is Amber Beckton.
Our theme music was composed by Alexis Guardado and Danny Gray. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.
Lizzie Borden took an ant and gave her mother 40 wives. Once he saw what he had done, he gave her father 41.